some possible recommendations. If you email me, my email is in my bio. If you email me, maybe I can send you something through there. Inshallah, give me a chance to think about what might be some good recommendations for you. But we started talking about Shaytan and Iblis. Inshallah. We started talking about Shaytan and Iblis a few days ago. So a few days ago, Shaytan, we discussed how the word Shaytan means something being distant, right? Something possibly being rebellious or something of that nature. And we talked about how Shaytan could actually be a reference to something that's connected to our own selves and not just something that's outside of us, that it could have to do with our own qualities that we need to work on, our own bad qualities that try to come out from time to time. And we started off talking yesterday about Iblis, or maybe the day before about Iblis, and how those two things work together. And one of the conclusions that we came to, perhaps, is that Iblis is in reference to the bad qualities while they're still hidden before they come out. And once they come out and they start affecting other people, then these are the qualities that we call shaytan. And we looked at one place in the Quran yesterday in Surah 7 where we discussed that. So I want to talk about that today a little bit more in a different place in the Quran, which is, we're going to start with chapter 17, verse 61. That's where we're going to start out. 1761. Okay? So, again, the idea that we're working with. So, you'll find these two terms in the Quran. You find the term Iblis, and then in some verses, shortly after, you find Iblis and the story about Iblis refusing to make sujood to Adam along with the Malaika. Shortly after that, in some of the verses, you find a discussion of Shaytan. So why does it switch all of a sudden from Iblis to Shaytan? So one of the potential explanations for that we're looking at is if we think of these things as personifications of our bad qualities, meaning we're not just thinking of these things as beings that are external to us, as things that just exist outside of us, but we're also thinking about these things in terms of being kind of like metaphors for our own bad qualities that we have to work on. So Iblis is those bad qualities once they're still hidden before they've come out. And Shaitan is when those qualities come out and they start affecting other people. And so that's why it changes from Iblis to Shaitan, potentially, perhaps. So if we read these verses here, 1761, these verses starting from 61, we're going to read up to probably verse 65, from 1761 to 1765. These verses are really, really beautiful. And I think these verses in particular not only show the idea that we're talking about how it switches from Iblis to Shaitan in the discussion, but also it shows the artistic beauty of the Quran, the imagery of the Quran, how the Quran conveys things with certain words that paint a picture in our minds as we read the story. So, verse 1761 starts with, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ. And when we said to the malaika, when we said to the angels, make sujood to Adam, فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ, so they all made sujood except Iblis. قَالَ أَأَسْجُدُ لِمَنْ خَلَقْتَ طِينًا. He said, قَالَ أَأَسْجُدُ لِمَنْ خَلَقْتَ طِينًا. He said, should I make sujood to the one that you created from clay? Okay, so verse 1761 starts with the command, or Allah saying to the malaika to make sujood to Adam, and they all made sujood except for Iblis. And he said, shall I make sujood to the one that you created from clay? Then the next verse, قَالَ أَرَأَيْتَكَ هَذَا الَّذِي كَرَّمْتَ عَلَيَّ. So this is Iblis talking now. He says, do you see this one that you have honored above me? Do you see this one that you have honored above me? لَإِنْ أَخَّرْتَنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. If you postpone me to the day of judgment, لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّ ذُرِّيَّتَهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Okay, I want to study this phrase a little bit. I think, let me see how he translates it. I think he's probably going to say, I will mislead his offspring except for a few. But I want to show you the beauty of this word. But I like to look up the translation so that way we can all be on the same page. If you're like following from a translation, you could see what words I'm talking about. So he translates it here as, I will certainly cause his progeny, his offspring, to perish except for a few. So he says, he translates it here as, I will cause his progeny to perish. Okay. Now, another translation. Let's go to another translation. So another translation is, I will bring his progeny into complete subjugation, barring a few, or except for a few. So why do these two translations translate that differently? That if you defer me till the day of judgment, I will bring his progeny or his offspring, salam, to this one. This translation says, I will bring his progeny or cause his progeny to perish, except for a few. But this one says, I will bring his progeny into complete subjugation. So why do we have different translations? Okay, because they're trying to translate this very interesting phrase, this very interesting word, لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّ ذُرِّيَّتَهُ, that I will do whatever this thing is to his offspring. ذُرِّيَّتَهُ is his offspring. But what the action that's being talked about is لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّهُ. لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّ. So I'm going to write that for you so you can see the exact word. This is 1762 is where we're at now. I'm going to show you the exact word that's being translated in different ways. أَحْتَنِكَنَّ. That's the word. لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّ. أَحْتَنِكَنَّ. That's the word. Okay? Now they're translating this word in two different ways here, and if you look up different translations, you'll probably find a bunch of different translations because the word itself is very interesting. So remember you from, no, I think you got me mixed up with someone else. So because this word itself is very interesting, right? So that's why you find different translations, and if you were to look up 5 or 10 other translations, I'm quite sure you would find other translations. Like some might say, I will mislead his offspring, for example. So here you're going to find two different translations in these two that I looked at, that I will cause his offspring to perish. And the other one says, I will bring his offspring. Yeah, no, that's not me. Maybe I look like somebody that you remember. Yeah. And I will cause his offspring to be subjugated, or I will bring his offspring to subjugation. No, you're good. But the word is the one I put on the screen. أَحْتَنِكَنَّ. Okay? لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّ. Now, what is the root of this word in Arabic? Where does this word come from? This is what makes this word very interesting. So this word comes from hanak. Hanak. لَأَحْتَنِكَنَّ from hanak. So what is hanak? What does that mean? I'm so confused. I don't know how Susan got involved with that. What has Susan got to do with that? Immediately that took my mind back to I don't know if you guys were ever fans of Seinfeld. I'm not sure if that's popular right now with everything that's going on, being that they were Jewish, but this was a show back in the day that I used to like all the time. And there's an episode, the Susan episode. If you ever watch Seinfeld, you'll get it. So yeah, the Susan episode with Elaine and Susan, but Elaine is Susan and Susan is Elaine, and they called her Susie. It's a whole thing. Anyway, sorry, but I digress. So Hanak, what is Hanak? This is where this word comes from that's being translated in different ways, and that Iblis said he will do to the offspring of the human being that was created. La ahtanikanna. That's okay. So Hanak means, Hanak, now my autocorrect is acting weird. Hanak means palate. This is one of the meanings of it. Hanak means palate, like that. Like the roof of your mouth. That's called hanak. That's one of the meanings for it. Okay? So in Arabic, we have a phrase that we will say, hanaktu dabba. Hanaktu dabba. Wa alaikum salam. So in Arabic, let me write this phrase for you, because this is all related to that word. We would say, hanaktu adabba. And what that means is, that's a phrase that would translate to, I bridled the animal. Okay? So these are all variations of this word hanak in Arabic, that is being said by Iblis that he will do to the offspring of the human being. La ahtanikanna. So hanak is the roof of your mouth, like the palate or the upper part of your mouth on the inside. That's one meaning of it in Arabic, hanak. And then in Arabic, we also say hanaktu. Oh, I said adana. I meant to say adaba. Those two N's should be a B. I'm sorry. Adaba. Right? Yeah, the part you burn with pizza, exactly. Bridle, when you bridle an animal, like a horse, you put the bit. Yeah, you put the bit in the mouth. So a bridle has like 3 different parts at least, maybe more, but three off the top of my head. The bit that you put in the mouth that it clamps down on. Yeah, it should be adaba. Thank you. The bit that it clamps down on, the part that goes on its head, and the reins that are used to control. Right? That's a bridle. When you bridle an animal, you put this bit in its mouth, and you put something on its head, and you have the reins that you steer it. Okay? So in Arabic, how we phrase that, we say hanaktu. If you do that to an animal or a horse, you say hanaktu. You bridled it. Hanak, because you put the bit in its mouth for it to bite on so you can control it. Right? So that's where this word derives from. This word that Iblis is using here. That's where it derives from. La ahtanikanna dhurriyatahu. That I will do this action to his offspring, to the human being's offspring. Okay? So that's why you find a couple different translations, because this word is a very interesting, very colorful, very vivid word that gives us a lot of imagery. Yes. So like he's saying, La ahtanikanna dhurriyatahu. What will I do to his offspring? I will bridle them. Like I will put this in their mouth to control them. Right? I will bridle them. So that's a very rich, vivid picture of this fight we have within us internally with that part of ourselves that is Iblis, those bad qualities that are part of ourselves that are consistently trying to control us. It's like there's something like strapped into our mouth, in our head, that's trying to steer us, that we have to constantly fight against, right? So that's a really beautiful picture that's given there by this word. La ahtanikanna dhurriyatahu illa qalila. Except for a few. Now let's keep reading. قال اذهب. He said, go. فمن تبعك. وعليكم السلام. He said, go. فمن تبعك. Whoever follows you, منهم فإن جهنم جزاؤكم جزاء موفورا. That Jahannam is your recompense. جزاء موفورا. Then in 64, now this is when it gets interesting again, and very vivid in the imagery, walaikum salam, and in the wording of it. He says, وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ بِصَوْتِكَ. Oh, subhanAllah, that's a beautiful point. I wasn't aware of that. Thank you for that. So this part of the verse here is really interesting too. Or this part of the story, this is in verse 64. وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ bisautika. So again, let me see how they translate it, and then I'm gonna break it down word for word. So here he says and incite whoever you can of them with your voice. Okay, wastafziz man istata'ta minhum bisautik. So he translates it as incite whoever you can with your voice. Okay, how does he translate it? Let's see. He translates it as mislead any of them you may with your voice. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to mention about this. So first of all, let me look this verse up before I mention this point. Because this is one of the ones I didn't look up. I meant to look up the number, and I forgot. So let me see. Da'autukum fastajabatum li. Where is that? Da'autukuma. Da'autukuma fastajabatum li. Give me 1 second. I wrote down all my other notes, but this is the one verse that I forgot to write down the number of it. Fastajabtum li. Okay, I got it. All right, so there's a couple points I want to make about this. So number one, he's saying, yeah, Shaytan potentially like the ego or the shadow self. People have described it in different ways. Wa alaikum salam. People have described it in different ways, right? But potentially, like, it's along those same lines. People have found different ways throughout history to describe this archetype of like a shadow self or a part of yourself, like these bad characteristics or these bad inclinations that try to lead you in certain ways, right? People have described them with different words throughout history, right? Throughout the history of humanity. Perhaps this is the Quranic way of telling us or using descriptions, vivid imagery to give us the idea of what that battle is like. That you have this Iblis part of you that are these bad characteristics that are hidden, and then when they come out, right? So you have to these are characteristics that you have to consistently and constantly try to work against and try to fight. But when they do come out, then this is Shaytan. This is the harm that is caused by these bad characteristics coming out. So here he says, وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ بِصَوْتِكَ. So some people translate this as mislead whoever you can with your voice. So the first thing I want to say is this part of the verse, with your voice, okay, with your voice. Some people think or interpret that as referring to music. Personally, I don't think we should limit it to any particular thing, okay? And in fact, when I was researching this, I looked in one of the famous tafsirs that we went to a few times before in our classes, which is the tafsir of Tabari. And he mentions different opinions about this, but then his conclusion is, he says, Lam yukhassis, and I think he makes an important point, that's why I want to quote this. He says, Lam yukhassis sawtan duna sawt, فَكُلُّ صَوْتٍ كَانَ دُعَاءً إِلَيْهِ وَإِلَى عَمَلِهِ وَطَاعَتِهِ وَخِلَافًا لِلدُّعَاءِ إِلَى طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ دَاخِلٌ فِي مَعْنَى صَوْتِهِ. So the point that he makes is that in this verse, Allah didn't specify one kind of a voice to the exclusion of another, right? So when he says, mislead those who you can with your voice, he didn't specify. What he's saying is he didn't specify a particular kind of voice or a particular kind of sound over another. He just left it general, with your voice. So he concludes, At-Tabari concludes, فَكُلُّ صَوْتٍ كَانَ دُعَاءً إِلَيْهِ. So every kind of a voice that is a call to him, a call to Iblis or these kind of qualities, وَإِلَى عَمَلِهِ, and to his actions, وطاعته, and to obeying him, وخلافا للدعاء إلى طاعة الله, and is the opposite of calling one to the obedience of Allah, فهو داخل في معنى صوته, then that voice falls under the meaning of sotihi, his voice in this verse. So to simplify, I just wanted to read you that definition because I thought it was a really important insight. But to simplify it, basically what he's saying is when he says mislead those of them you can with your voice, he didn't specify that to be one kind of voice and not another. So any kind of voice, anything, and it doesn't even have to be a literal physical voice, but anything that calls you to the qualities of Iblis is a part of that. Mislead those whom you can with your voice. So whatever that thing might be, if it calls you to the qualities of Iblis, then that's part of his voice. Can you guys hear that? I think that's so creepy. It creeps me out every time I hear it. The ice cream truck. That's so creepy. So any voice that calls you to the qualities of Iblis, right, is a part of his voice. Okay, does that make sense? So what stuffs is the voice? Yeah, anything, any kind of, I agree. Any kind of online platform, potentially. Oh wow, I have to look that up. I didn't know that. Any kind of a book potentially, because that's a person's voice. It's their message. Any whatever it might be, anything that's calling you to the qualities of Iblis is part of his voice. Okay, that's basically, to sum it up in my own words. That's what At-Tabari is saying here. That he didn't, waswas or du'a. Potentially, potentially we could be stepping outside of Allah's protection. Can the voice be actions? I wouldn't see why not, because it's all a part of calling you to the qualities of Iblis. It's all a part of anything that calls you to those qualities. Allah knows best. Because see, the idea of calling, that's the verse I was looking at. In another verse, 1422. In 1422, he mentions, in 1422, he mentions, because, see, even if we take the word sot, voice, right? When we vote, we call that tasweet. We call that giving your voice, right? Tasweet, in Arabic, right? And why do we call it that? Because your vote, when you vote for someone, that's you expressing your voice of who you think should be the leader in a particular situation. Even if you don't physically say anything, but your action of casting a ballot is a sot. You follow what I'm saying? So we want to think about it in an expansive way. So 1422, he says, وَقَالَ الشَّيْطَانُ, right? وَقَالَ الشَّيْطَانُ. Yeah, if it's really far from what we're studying, then I would prefer if you message me and ask me, because I tried for the most part to stay within the subject as much as we can. 1422, because we only have an hour. وَقَالَ الشَّيْطَانُ لَمَّا قُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ, and ash-shaytan will say, لَمَّا قُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ, this is 1422, when the matter has been finished and completed, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَعَدَكُمْ وَعْدَ الْحَقِّ, that inshallah, that Allah has promised you the promise of truth, وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ, and I promised you and I violated my promise, I broke my promise. Wa alaikum salam. وَمَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ, and I did not have any authority over you, إِلَّا أَن دَعَوْتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي, except that I called you and you responded, you answered, right? So the sot, wa alaikum salam, the sot, the voice, is the calling. Follow me? It's anything that calls you to those qualities. So وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ بِصَوْتِكَ, mislead those whom you can by your voice, is potentially, if we use this verse to help explain it, is the da'wah, any call towards those qualities, whether that call comes from literally the voice or whether that call comes from actions or anything that draws us to those qualities. Yeah, that's why because that's why this way of thinking about it to me is so beautiful, because it's something that gives us responsibility. Like, we can't blame it on anyone else. The qualities of Iblis and the qualities of Shaytan are a part of us. They exist within us. So if we go back to, I just wanted to go to that verse for a second, but if we go back to 1764. So 1764, again, in the beginning of it, he says, وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ بِصَوْتِكَ, and mislead whomsoever you can by your voice. Now, I've been loosely translating the beginning of this as mislead, okay? But now I want to look at this word a little bit more and put it together with the idea of your voice. What he actually says here is istafziz. Istafziz. So let me give you this word also. Istafziz. Istafziz. So that's actually what he's saying. Istafziz. Those are all probably around the meaning, right? But if we look at some of the root meaning of this word, so where does this istafziz come from in Arabic? It comes from fez or fezza. Okay? And this means, if we say fez in Arabic, oops, I think I just sent the wrong comment. I said jazz. I did what Cody did earlier. It keeps changing it to jazz when he wrote Susan, and I'm like, what's Susan got to do with all this? So fez means, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble typing now, means khafif, jazz hands. Yeah, fez means khafif, khafif, to lighten. Okay, so one of the meanings of fez in Arabic is khafif, to make something light. Okay, so istafziz man istata'ta minhum bisawtika, do this istifzaz, istafziz, those whoever you have the ability from amongst them with your sawt, with your voice. So in other words, lighten them, make them light. Okay, now what does that mean though exactly? So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So what's interesting about this is, if we look at this word in the Quran, the variations of this word istafziz or istifzaz, it's only 3 times in the Quran, and it's all in this same chapter, all in chapter 17. And I don't think that's a coincidence. See how beautiful the Quran fits together? That this word istafziz that he's telling Iblis is only in the whole Quran 3 times, and they're all in this one chapter. Okay? So, and the root word means to lighten or to make something light. Okay? And I'm going to explain that a little bit more. But I want to show chapter 17 is called Al-Isra, or it's called Bani Israel. It has 2 names. So let's look at the other 2 times that it's mentioned. Let's look at the other 2 times that it's mentioned in this chapter. So it's mentioned in verse 76. So 1776 is mentioned, and it says, وَإِن كَادُوا لَيَسْتَفِزُّونَكَ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. Now look at this phrase here. He says they were almost about to what? Okay, let's look at what he says here. They were almost about to. See, here he translates it as unsettle. To unsettle you from the land. To unsettle. That's how he translates it here. And let me look at this one. He just says expelled you. Okay, but the word is the same word. The word is the same word that's used with Iblis. Istafziz where Allah told Iblis to istafziz, do this word with your voice. So it's the same word here in verse 76 that they translate as unsettled, to make you not settled. وَإِنْ كَادُوا لَيَسْتَفِزُّونَكَ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. If you like, you can hear the word, right? Oh yeah, subhanAllah, 1776. Good point. That's a beautiful connection. They were almost about to la yastafizzunaka min al-ardi. They were about to unsettle you from the earth, from the land, li yukhrijuka minha, in order to expel you from there. Okay? So here we can see the meaning of making something light, because the opposite of being light is something being heavy, something being established, something being firm. So they wanted to yastafizunaka. They wanted to uproot you. They wanted to make you unsettled. They wanted to make you light, because if they make you light, if they make you unsettled, whether that could be through fear, like they can easily get you out. So they want to unsettle you. Maybe it's from weakening you. Maybe it's from ideas, the ideas that they give you, the way that they make you think, influencing your thoughts, all kind of different ways that this can occur, right? But the root meaning is to make you light, to make you frivolous, to make you trivial, right? And isn't that what people do? Look at the things that we argue about online, for example. Instead of doing what we try to get together to do here every day, studying the Quran and trying to, take our time that we have together in a serious way. Look at what we see a lot of the times when we look at different places online, the different arguments that happen, the different frivolous things that are often talked about. And nothing wrong with like having certain times when we just relax and let our hair down. I'm not saying that, but I'm just giving examples of how this idea of making one light, istifzaz, in the Quran, it seems to always have a negative connotation because it's only 3 times, and I'm gonna show you the other time too. These are at the same time every day, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So like all these different kinds of ways that they bring you out, they bring you out from being serious and being stable and being rational and logical, whether that's, again, through all these different tactics, right? People use different tactics. They use fear tactics. They use brainwashing tactics. They use all kind of different ways to unsettle you. And so in doing that, la yastafizunaka min al-ard, he says, they want to unsettle you from the earth, li yukhrijuka minha, in order to expel you from the, not the earth, from the land here, I think it means, to expel you from a particular land. Now, the other place that it's used is in verse 103. So in verse 103, this is actually talking about Fir'aun, right? So it's talking about Pharaoh. And yeah, for sure, I agree. And 17:103, he says here, فَأَرَادَ أَنْ يَسْتَفِزَّهُمْ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. This is talking about Pharaoh, Fir'aun. He says he intended or wanted to يَسْتَفِزَّهُمْ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. He wanted to unsettle them from the land. فَأَغْرَقْنَاهُ وَمَنْ مَعَهُ جَمِيعًا. So we drowned him and those who were with him altogether. I wonder if in 103, here he translates it the same way. So in 103, he says he sought to turn them out of the land. And what does he say in 103? So here in 103, he says what? Let's see. Scare them from the land. So you see, you get different translations when you look in different places. So one place says scare them from the land. One place says unsettle them from the land. But it's all the same word, istifzaz, to make someone light, easy, trivial, frivolous. Exactly. That's a good analogy, right? So he wanted to an yastafizzahum min al-ard. This is Pharaoh. He wanted to unsettle them or make it easy to get them out. And then look in the next verse in 104. وَقُلْنَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلِ. And we said after him to Bani Israel, Uskunu al-ard. Become settled in the earth. Become settled in the earth. So you see how those are opposite, right? Because he starts off with saying, right? He wanted to yastafizzahum min al-ard. He wanted to lighten them in order to expel them. And then the very next verse in 104, Allah says, we said to Bani Israel, Uskunul ard. Dwell in the earth, right? Dwell and be still. Like the word here used as dwell or translated as dwell, uskunu is from sakan, which means stillness. So be still in the earth. So that means yastafizzahum. Yeah, that's the verse we're studying. Wastafziz man istata'ta minhum bisawtik. That's why we're looking at these other examples to see the meaning of it. Yeah, exactly. From sakina means to become still and at rest. So you see how sakana uskunul ard, what Allah told Bani Israel to be still in the earth, is the opposite of what Pharaoh wanted, which was yastafizzahum min al-ard. He wanted them to not be still and stable. He wanted to uproot them, right? Follow my point? So now, let's go back to verse 64, now that we studied those. So verse 64, he said, so in the other two places that this same word is used, in verse 76 and verse 103, in both of those places, it's used in the context of trying to kick people out of a certain land or expel people from a certain land, right? So now let's think about that in reference to Iblis. وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ بِصَوْتِكَ. Istafziz, do istifzaz to whomever you can with your voice. So that means his voice is trying to do what to us? It's trying to uproot us. It's trying to not make us firm and stable and rational and calm and still and logical. It's trying to draw us away and make us unstable. Just like we see in other parts of the Quran where it talks about Shaytan wants to create fear. إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَهُ. It is only Shaytan who makes you fear his awliya, his friends and supporters and protectors. And in another place, إِنَّمَا النَّجْوَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ لِيَحْزُنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. That an-najwa, private talks, are from Shaytan in order to make those who have believed feel sad. So what does Shaytan want to do? Make us feel these negative emotions. This is perhaps an aspect of what Shaytan is the making us feel sad, making us feel fear, making us unstable and not settled, right? Making us trivial, making us caught up on the life of this world. These are all qualities of that Shaytan part of us, right? And perhaps we can say all of these are a part of istifzaz. These are the lightening, the triviality of who we are, making us trivial people, making us concerned about trivial things, making us concerned about minor things. All of that with your voice, all of the things that are calling us away from things that are actually important. Yeah, uprooting from the present moment. I love that. Towards the future, meaning fear, or towards the past, meaning sadness. Right, exactly. Taking us away from the promises of Allah. All of that could apply to that word because in essence, that word is being used to make it easy to uproot someone from a particular place. وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ بِصَوْتِكَ. Okay, so now let's read the rest of it. وَأَجْلِبْ عَلَيْهِمْ بِخَيْلِكَ وَرَجِلِكَ. Now this is an interesting part of the verse. That's why I say when you read these verses have a lot of vivid imagery. They make these word pictures come to our minds. Because the next thing he says is, attack them, wa alaikum salam, attack them with your cavalry and your foot soldiers. Let me see if that's how he translates it. If he translates that the same way. Yeah, basically, he says, attack them with your cavalry and your soldiers on foot. Now, what does that mean? Attack them with your cavalry and your soldiers on foot. So there could be different layers and levels that we can analyze that on. But one very simple way to think about it is what I've been saying, that the Quran gives us these very vivid word pictures, right? This idea of this part of ourselves, the Iblis part, that number one is trying to uproot us, or is the unstable part that's trying to take us away from all the different things that we just talked about, the present moment and looking to the future and having fear, looking to the past and having sadness, making us unstable, making us trivial, all of that with that voice. وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنْ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ بِصَوْتِكَ. And do this istifzaz, do this lightning, right? Yeah, do this lightning of taking people out of this stability, right, with your voice. And then he said, وَأَجْلِبْ عَلَيْهِمْ بِخَيْلِكَ وَرَجِلِكَ, and attack them with your cavalry and your foot soldiers. So it just brings to mind, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to take that literally, but it just brings to mind this unrelenting assault, that you have this cavalry, like these horses, khayl, the cavalry, the soldiers that are coming on horseback to attack you, warajilik, and your foot soldiers. So you have this whole army that's continuously coming at you from all directions with all your might. Yeah, that's another way of thinking about it. And even this word ajlib, I like this word ajlib. Yeah, for sure, to go away from siratul mustaqim. Subhanallah, that's another way to think about it. Even the word here that I'm translating as attack, the word is ajlib. Ajlib. So he's telling him ajlib. So this word is ajlib. Ajlib. That's the word I'm translating as attack. But this word comes from jalaba. So jalaba means, in Arabic, it means sawqu shay min mawdi'in ila akhar. Sawqu shay min mawdi'in ila akhar. So jalaba means that you transport something from one place to another. That's the meaning of it. So the part of the verse, yeah, to bring, you can say to bring, right? To bring something from one place to another. So in Arabic, we express that by saying sawqu shay, to transport or bring something, min mawdi'in ila akhar, from one place to another. And that's the word that's being translated here as attack. Attack them with your cavalry and your soldiers on foot. Bikhaylika wa rajilik. Or all your might is maybe another way of thinking about it. But ajlib, meaning this person is bringing, Iblis is bringing all of this might from one place to attack you. It's like it puts in your mind this vivid imagery of this struggle, this war against negative things, negative thoughts, negative qualities, negative actions, etc. And even some people, some scholars explain this word ajlib from jalaba, meaning to shout or some noise. So because, in other words, if you're bringing this army from one place to another, it's like it gives you this very vivid image of someone like leading this army and then saying like, come on, let's go, like mount up, something like that. So that word has these two potential meanings to it. Ajlib, meaning to bring something from one place to another, and also some noise or some shouting, right? So that's a really interesting, vivid word. But do you see how, like, when you unpack these words in the Quran, word by word, you see how much vivid imagery it brings up in your mind? Like how it just paints this picture. Yeah, mobilize all your forces. Yeah, subhanAllah. Yeah, for sure. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So let's read the rest of the verse because our time is winding down. So he says, وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ وَعِدْهُمْ, and share with them, partner with them, or join with them in their wealth and in their children. How does Iblis share with you in your wealth and your children? I'm going to talk about that in a second. وَعِدْهُمْ, and promise them. وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا, and Shaytan does not promise anything except deception. Now, I want you to notice something, because this is one of the main things. Like, there's a few different things about these verses that we're looking at, but one of the main things that we're looking at is how it goes from Iblis to Shaytan, right? Look at how the story in 61 starts with Iblis. Follow the train of thought. So I'm going to read it again, because we paused at a lot of different words. So I want you to pick this up. So in 61 he says, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ قَالَ أَأَسْجُدُ لِمَنْ خَلَقْتَ طِينًا. When we said to the malaika, make sujud with Adam, so they all made sujud except Iblis, he said, well, I make sujud to the one that you created from clay. So who is the conversation with? The conversation is with Iblis. So we go to 62. قال أرأيتك هذا الذي كرمت عليه. He said, do you see this one that you have favored over me? Still Iblis, right? لئن أخرتني إلى يوم القيامة لأحتنكن ذريته إلا قليلا. If you postpone me to the day of judgment, I will lead. We talked about this word, أحتنكن. I will put the bit in their mouth and lead them, right? All lead his offspring except for a few. Who's talking? Still Iblis, right? قال اذهب فمن تبعك منهم. He said, go, whoever follows you from amongst them. فإن جهنم جزاؤكم جزاء موفورا. Then Jahannam is your recompense. جزاء موفورا. Okay? Still talking about Iblis, right? واستفزز من استطعت منهم بصوتك. This is still a conversation with Iblis. Do istifzaz of whoever you can amongst them with your voice. وَأَجْلِبْ عَلَيْهِمْ بِخَيْلِكَ وَرَجْلِكَ. And attack them with your cavalry and your soldiers on foot. وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ. And join with them in wealth and children. وَعِدْهُمْ. And promise them. وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. And a shaitan does not promise them anything except deception. Notice how it started with Iblis, right? Notice how it started with Iblis, and then it led up to saying in verse 64, وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانِ. That Shaytan doesn't promise them. You notice that? It started with Iblis. The conversation in 61 was talking about Iblis. And the whole conversation, it was back and forth between Allah and Iblis. And then at the end, Allah said, وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانِ. And a shaitan does not promise them. So meaning what? Allah knows best, but it starts with Iblis as these hidden bad qualities. These bad qualities that are kept inside, that are not expressed, that are hidden. But once the process comes to the point where they come out and they start to attack and harm others, now it becomes shaitan. Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Is everybody good? All right. So I don't know which part it froze on, so I'll say that what I just said one more time. Um, yeah, I'll repeat it again. What's the last? Can somebody tell me what's the last thing you heard? Oh, after deception. Okay. So again, okay. Um, so if you look at the discussion, right? Because we're talking about how it starts with Iblis and it ends with Shaitan, right? So it starts in 61 with Iblis, and then the conversation 61, 62, 63, all the way to the end of 64 is a conversation between Iblis and Allah. But then 64 ends with introducing the term Shaitan. وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. And Shaitan does not promise them anything except deception, right? It keeps freezing. Is everybody good? I don't know why it's freezing like that. Let me know if everybody's okay. It's okay again? Okay. All right, good. Alhamdulillah. So do you notice that? Do you see my point of how it starts in 61 talking about Iblis, And then as you read through it, there's a conversation between Iblis and Allah. And then at the end of 64, he says, وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانِ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. A shaitan does not promise them anything except deception. So it starts with Iblis. So these are the hidden qualities, right? The hidden bad qualities. But once you progress to the point where, as it says here, you're attacking others, you're misleading others, you're doing all these different things. Now these become the qualities of Shaytan. That's how Shaytan comes about from Iblis, is when you start to manifest these qualities outside of you to hurt other people, then that's when it becomes Shaytan. And Allah knows best. The part of these verses we didn't discuss, because we're running short on time, is where he told Iblis, وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ, and share with them or join with them in wealth and children. What does that mean? How does Iblis share in wealth and children? So inshallah, that's where we'll pick up tomorrow. I'll talk about that. But yeah, this will be on YouTube, inshallah. So you can review anything that you missed. So with that, maybe riba can be part of it. Yep, for sure. We're going to talk about that in detail because there's some verses that we want to go over and related to that. Inshallah. Iyak. Peace. Inshallah. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. See you guys tomorrow, inshallah. For sure. Thank you guys. Yes, Discord. For sure. Thank you too. Iyak. You too.